Okay, well, welcome. My name is John Vandemoer. It's my wife, Molly. We are here to talk about what has pretty much been talked about a lot this morning. I totally think that Kenny Reed and Gary Jobson stole our whole presentation and everything. They got it all from us completely. It's all from us. But we wanted to hopefully expand on it a little bit and really go through some of the ideas that we've had and we've learned over the few years and be able to open it up to you guys and have more of an interactive conversation rather than us just spouting stuff at you as much as possible. I will start this off. We don't have any highlight videos from boats going 60 miles per hour or anything like that, so if you're looking for that, we're see you later. Yeah, we keep that door open again. So we want to start off a little bit of describing what our learn to sail experience is, how we got into sailing, and because we have two very different pathways of getting into sailing and what we did. We actually grew up on opposite ends of the coast, so of the country. I grew up in New England on Cape Cod, and I grew up sailing wooden boats. I grew up sailing beetle cats. Kenny Reed talked about it a little bit in his talk this morning. I was that guy. I had a 1920 beetle cat. And I really got into it because I got to spend time with my dad. We got to, bend wooden ribs, we were able to, strip down boats, learn how to varnish, everything else, and it was kind of like a hands-on project for us. And as soon as we refurbished this 1920 beetle cat, I needed to learn how to sail. And so I lived in a place, it's pretty much heaven on Cape Cod in the summer. I get to go sail in Hyannis Harbor and Great Marsh and everything else, and be able to go spend the night in my beetle cat, as a kid, and had that really experience. I grew up at Hyannis Yacht Club and did the whole junior sailing scene as well. I was a little bit older than when Opties kind of caught on the Cape, so I coached Opties but didn't actually sail them. Which might have been a good thing with my current size. But I grew up sailing Club 420s and huge Club 420 events, and certainly got into the racing scene, but at the same time did a lot of cruising around the Cape, up into Maine, into Marblehead with my family as well. And what we really want to do with this conversation and in this topic is talk not only about racing, but also talk a lot about cruising, recreation, a big part of our sport that isn't mentioned a lot as well, because we both have experience in that way. Since then, my career has been in sailing in general, all the way. I've did a junior program, ran a junior program at Chicago Yacht Club. I've been an assistant coach and now a head coach in college sailing. I've done youth national team stuff, Olympic level stuff, kind of all over the place, all over the world, being able to be part of sailing. And like you've heard of so many people before, I just feel really lucky to be part of an awesome sport. And I think that's really, to me, the point of all of this, of keeping young sailors into the sport and keeping them going through the sport, your pure passion of the sport itself. And like it was talked about this morning, passion is everything. Having that passion, showing that passion in the sport, for me is something that I was always surrounded by people that showed that to me, and something that I really connected with, and I enjoy showing that to my sailors on a daily basis. It's not just about us trying to win a national championship as a college team at Stanford. It's about us coming together as a group, enjoying our passion together. We love being on the water. We love competing on the water and being part of that. And a big part of me loves cruising and going all over the place and seeing things from the water itself. It's a different perspective for sure.
So my background, like John said, opposite coast. I grew up here in San Diego, and sailing, similar to John, was very much a family sport. It was something that all my brother and sister and I, we were going to learn how to sail, and if we raced, great, and if we didn't, it doesn't matter. You at least had to learn how to swim and learn how to get from point A to point B safely. I grew up, so we had a Cal 29. That was our family boat, and we were on that every single weekend. We went out to the basin just close. We went to Catalina for the summer. It was always a family sport. Cruising was a big part of my youth. And then you get put into the junior program. I grew up at San Diego Yacht Club, sailed Sabbats. And as soon as it became racing, I was out of there. I was like, this just isn't that much fun. I was the youngest in my family, and my older siblings were pretty good at sailing. And so I was always so-and-so's little sister, and I was like, no, this is just not cool. Not part of what I wanted to be in. And so I stopped kind of right when it got for those Sabbat sailors right around B fleet, racing championship fleet for Opties. That's right when I took off out of sailing, and still did all the cruising. I sailed with my dad in Lehman 12s. I did other racing, just not when it was all about Molly trying to be you know, the next rock star, whatever it might be. So I did all the side sailing, the fun family stuff, and I actually got into music. I played clarinet, saxophone, all sorts of stuff for a few years. And then when I was my summer of 8th grade, all my friends said, hey, you know, my high school has, or the high school we're going to be going to, has a high school team, and you should try out. And I was like, oh, I don't know, I haven't sailed since I was like 11. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know if this is for me. But all my friends basically talked me into it. Went to the tryouts, and lo and behold, I made it. Got onto the team. All of a sudden, I was like, this is the coolest thing ever. It's not with my family. I get to go and hang out with all my friends, and I get to go down to the yacht club all by myself, and I go home at dinner, and I tell them about my day, but it was my own sailing. It wasn't necessarily the family trip, which I loved, but it was my own thing. Through that, once I got kind of back into the racing scene, I realized that I actually didn't know what I was doing, and I actually liked it again. And it wasn't, you know, it wasn't so-and-so's little sibling, and so it was just my own thing. And then I got onto a traveling team for the San Diego Yacht Club. So we actually didn't have 420s yet, so John missed out on the Opti train. I kind of missed out on the 420 train on the West Coast. We had FJs, and we sailed Laser 2s actually back then. So I did a lot of Laser 2 sailing. I did a little bit of 420s, but not a ton. But my trapezing was in Laser 2s. Did the youth, went to Youth Worlds, kind of went on the racing track that way. And so learned a lot of crewing, and then my high school team, that's kind of like spurred everything that I did for sailing. My high school team, full of lots of rock stars, they all graduated. And so here I am a senior, and I've got, you know, 10 freshmen and junior, you know, little kids, younger kids, whatever, on my team. So I had to drive. And I was like, oh gosh, you know, I haven't really driven a boat since I was 12. And then lo and behold, I knew what I was doing. You know, I drove my senior year of high school. That got the attention of, you know, college coaches. I sailed in college. I went to University of Hawaii, sailed there, and San Diego's full of, for most of you probably know, full of a lot of Olympic sailors or people with very successful sailing racing backgrounds. So I had lots of, you know, rock stars around me all the time growing up. You don't really realize it when they're around you all the time. But once I got into college, I thought, wait, what's my next step? I really love this sailing. I want to keep going. For me, that was Olympic sailing. So I have a sort of long path of Olympic campaigning. I drove a 470 for 2 years. I crewed in a 470 for 3 to 5 years, depending on where your math is. And then I jumped into match racing. I did a match racing campaign last quad, and we qualified and went to the games. And then I am now sailing a 49er, so the women's version of a 49er, an FX. But like John said, it's like you have many pathways, and it's what grabs each person. So for John, you know, it was, hey, during the winters, what was I working on? I was building my boat when I was a kid, making sure that it was so ready as soon as summer got here. For me, same thing, it was the cruising with my parents. They kept me, you know, I still was attached to the sailing, even though I was like, well, racing's not for me, I'm out of here. They still kept the interest there, and I was still into it. And then all of a sudden, my friends helped me out. They say, hey, let's go do this cool thing. You know, it's away from our parents, even though they're supplying, you know, the ticket to get me from point A to point B, but I'm on my own. I'm doing my own thing. But yeah, so if we go into, we kind of broke it down into 3 sort of sections.
Yeah, so, you know, one of the things they talked about is, even though our experiences were a little bit different, and Molly's I think is more prevalent to the stock, where she left sailing and came back to it in a big way, it was still, we got lucky, right? We grew up in San Diego and Cape Cod. Can't get much luckier than that. And you get to have families that sailing was a priority for them. But I think most of the kids that we teach and coach, Molly runs Peninsula Youth Sailing Foundation, which is a youth community foundation in Redwood City in California, in San Francisco. And I run a lot of community and youth programs as well, and now I work for the Club 420 class. But most of the kids that we talk to now don't have that family background, don't have that instant push to get into sailing. And so we want to talk a little bit about different ways to kind of get that in there and how to get kids in there. So when we thought about this topic, we thought of 3 key areas that are entry points into sailing itself. And again, we're focusing on trying to lower that age going through. So we're going to start from the beginning here and talk about the elementary and middle school age, how to get them in the boat for the first time, how to get them excited about sailing. I think one of the things that was key for me when I was running programs in Chicago was the timing structure, because when you want to tap into kids themselves, it's about tapping into the parents' carpool. You know, when can they get their kids physically down to the water? When can they make that happen? And so I looked at youth soccer leagues, looked at different sport leagues that were popular in my area, and I kind of adapted the same timing and made the programs not necessarily on what a traditional youth sailing program was, but made the programs adapt to when parents could come down and drop off their kids and be involved with that. I also worked on making classes for all ages. So at one given time, you don't have off days in the morning and high school sailing in the afternoon. We did it at the same time so parents could drop off their siblings, and have siblings there. Because I think one of the biggest ways to get multi-generations in there is to get them in right away and sailing together. And so having classes specifically set up to get all ages in one time frame is huge. We do that at Stanford. We run a youth program, ages 8 to 15, and a summer program, and it has nothing to do with racing. They don't do any racing at all. They think they're racing sometimes, but they're not really racing, right? It is totally beginner and intermediate. Our top level is intermediate. And we get 8 to 15-year-olds, which is a pretty big maturity timeline. And we get them out there in different classes, but the classes are at the same time. Parents can drop them off, they have a great time, the kids come back and have, talk about it, how great it is, and most importantly, they talk to their friends and how great it is too. In the end, our whole goal for that program is to have the 8 and 15-year-old go out and each of them separately take their parents sailing in our boats. That's the last day, is the big day that they all work towards, of taking their parents sailing and being able to show them that they can do that. And in San Francisco Bay in the middle of summer, that's a big deal. It's blowing 18 to 25 every day. So they have to learn some skills along the way, but we start off with that's our goal. That's our very achievable goal. And it's been pretty successful that way. Talk about high school?
Yeah, so high school, like I said, that's what got me to come back, the social scene. It's all the peer pressure. There's obviously lots of negative peer pressure out there, but this is a pretty big positive. Trying to get kids completely just realizing that it's their own thing and that they're excited to have a team atmosphere, something that it's all about them. The other part that, so I like John mentioned, I run a junior program that's a standalone, like we don't have a yacht club associated with us. And we have kids from all walks of life that have no sailing background whatsoever. And having them walk up, and usually the first thing is like, well, I've never really seen the water, and I can pass the swim test. And then at the end of the 2-week, or maybe all summer long camp, being able to say, great, I can rig that boat, put it all together, showing that here's an attainable goal for this kid, who's not going to be trying to go to the Olympics, but they want to be able to go and have fun. That's something that this kid can do. So making sure in high school age, it's not, okay, well, we're all geared towards going to the Mallory, the high school national championship. That's not the end goal. The end goal for my program, there's, we have 50 high school kids that sail in my program, and I'd say I have 2 kids, not even necessarily a whole high school team, that could actually sail at nationals. The level is kind of all over the place, and it's great because they come to practice saying, this is so fun. I get to rig up my boat, and I get to go sailing, and maybe next year I'll have somebody that's sailing in Gold Fleet, and maybe they'll make it to nationals, you never know. But it's a goal that each kid's making for themselves. And most of the kids are setting this goal of, I want to have fun, I want to hang out with my friends, and hey, lo and behold, I actually know how to make a boat go from point A to point B. So that kind of also, minus high school sailing teams, also the racing teams. So my program, we have, so John, we're right next door to each other where our programs are, and I'm sort of like the next step for all of his intermediate kids. So I offer a lot of racing classes as well. And so we do, the travel team, and like most yacht clubs are structured, I have kids that are traveling up and down the West Coast in their Opties and 420s and such, 29ers. But giving them something, again, that they're just making their goal for what they want to do next. I find that if I just lay out, here's what everyone's going to do for this semester, maybe I catch 10% of the kids and they're actually working towards it. And it's more work, it's more of a fight on my end to try and talk them into it. If they come up with their own goals and keep it fun within themselves. Here are the 10 kids that are 15, they're going to tell me what they want to do. And I'll curtail them and push them hopefully in the a better direction if I can listen to something, but them coming up with what they want to work towards is usually going to keep them involved longer.
And I think an important thing in this time frame too for high school students is something that was cool for me growing up is I had a group where if you were able to be somewhat successful sailing, not racing, but being able to sail from point A to point B, you got rewarded by all the parents who come down in their boats. You know, they recruit a bunch of yacht club members to bring in their bigger boats, and we'd all sail to Martha's Vineyard for the day, in fact. You know, and that was like a big deal for us to do that. In San Francisco Bay, you can go out into the bay in a bigger boat and have that other experience. By learning these fundamentals, you get this other experience, and you get intrigued, because that's a goal that you want to reach. It keeps them engaged and wanting to do something else, because there's another reward within your sport, right? That's pretty exciting and gives you a different experience. And you're enticing them to learn more, but they don't even know it, right? It's kind of hidden inside that. Looking at the college and post-college, and it's mainly the athletes that I work with at this time, this is definitely a tough time, and certainly this is something that has been talked about already this morning a lot, and will be talked about some more during this time of how to get people in boats. So we've heard this already this morning, easy access, and access is huge, right? 10, 15 years ago, we were looking at maybe longer than that, maybe 20 years ago, you were 29 years old, you were probably starting a family, owning a house, and probably owning a boat maybe, even at that time. Now, there's no way any of those are really happening, right? It's a lot harder for a 25-year-old to buy a house. I'm 36, I'm not even close to that, right? I don't own a boat. Well, you know, technically it's an FX in Europe, but don't really own a boat.
You don't go sailing much, so.
Just pay for the boat. But you know, and we don't have a family either. We have a cool dog, but that's right. But you know, you don't have that. Right? It's a different time, it's a different generation, so really tapping into that generation is huge. And we're certainly going to get more in depth into this. Fun, exciting sailing. You know, when I worked at Chicago Yacht Club and grew up in Hyannis and stuff like that, it was the same thing. It was everybody went to the Saturday, all-day Saturday series, or all-day Thursday series, or whatever else it was. And it was like every week you do this long series. I'm telling you, kids in college, stuff like that, they have a lot of other things to do. Rock concerts, Woodstock, you know, whatever it is. They're going to go to these things, and so our sailing time can't be that long, right? Having smaller events instead of long series is much more successful. Of having like, okay, we're going to be able to have this event, and you know, you're gearing your summer up where you can plan your summer up ahead by being able to do those events, and I still have free time to do other things, you know, and be able to tap into that. I thought it was really cool, and we used to live in Annapolis, and they had this great series, but they had this great regatta that was started at 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and it was 3 days. So right after work during the week, then the summertime and the weekends in Annapolis, forget about it. You can like walk across the harbor on the motorboats that go by. But in the afternoons after work, it's not as many, and the wind is actually good. And so from 4 to 7 for 3 days, that would be the regatta. It would be those 3 days just in the afternoon. So after work, everybody's excited, they hop on the train, get in the bus, hop in their car, they show up and they go sailing, and then they have that short time, and it keeps them engaged. It fits their schedule. Because right after, at 7 o'clock, right after that, they're all going to the bar, going to the restaurant, hanging out at the yacht club, whatever it is. It's all built-in social scene right there. And the built-in social scene is huge. I go to a lot of yacht clubs that say, oh, we're open, we want people to come in and everything else. But, you know, you have to take off your hat when you walk inside, you have to turn your cell phone off, you have to wear coat and tie in the dining room, and everything else. And I'm all for traditions. I grew up in New England, we're all about traditions, right? But there are times where we need to open those up and open up the barriers a little bit more. Have the tent outside all the time in the summer, right? Relax some of the rules, allow people to come in and have a good time with that, and make the crowd a younger age for that as well. Going a little bit more in depth in these topics, talking about elementary and middle school. So PE adventure classes, this is something that I'm new to that's in California, which I thought was really cool, is that I've had teachers come up to me and they say, hey, we want to do a PE adventure class with you. I'm like, what is a PE adventure class, right? And what it is they have a week of school that they come up and they have to do some other activity besides sitting in the classroom, but an educational activity. And so what we've done is we've worked with a couple elementary and middle schools where they come in and we teach them how to sail, right? So they do sailing, and then they add a little bit of science into it as well, and I work with the elementary school teachers to work on this, and it's a really cool program. what we've done in Chicago is I used to try to get kids sailing and get down to the yacht club because Chicago doesn't have a lot of sailing families. It's got a lot of cool sailing, but not a lot of sailing families. Most of the kids that I coached there, their parents knew nothing about sailing. And I was always astonished when I put them in the van and we went to drove 20 hours to BBR and Hyannis and everything else. The parents were totally fine with that. They had no idea who I was and had no sailing history, but they were totally cool with that. I don't know how that works out. I guess I'll figure that out someday. But what I used to do is go into libraries at these schools and they'd have library reading hours. And I would go in and volunteer to read, a story about sailing and teach them how to tie knots. And I'd do it with a life jacket on and a goofy hat and stuff like that. And the kids loved it. They're really into it. And they go home to their parents and they're like, hey, we met this guy today. He's a complete idiot. We had a really fun time. He could barely read. But he did a great job. And so the parents are like, oh, this is great. And they got connected in and they get a call up or they look on our website. And lo and behold, our younger group for our sailing school grew. And constantly grew to the point where I had to hire a full-time coach just for our green fleet, just to get beginner sailing year-round in Chicago, which is pretty amazing. Year-round in Chicago right now. And all they did was teach beginning sailing to these young elementary school kids, just because they took the time to read in the library a couple times a week. So, take your friends sailing and their parents too. We have a lot where we do this in college. Bring their professors down. It's a great way to talk to their professors. And the little office hours is on a sailboat, right? Bring your professor down, teach them how to sail. Same thing, teaching your friends down, bring them down. I know Molly does that at PYSF, and her high school programs, escalate every time she does that, right? Numbers grow right away because you're getting them in there. Right? Take kids sailing on cool boats, right? We've seen that a lot this morning and stuff like that, but I think all of us have cool boats, or at least cool boats that are cool in certain conditions. So don't set up your come in and go sailing for the first time in Long Island Sound in July, right? Probably not a good idea, right? Don't do it in Annapolis in July in the middle of the day, right? But do it when you know you're going to get a little sea breeze. Do it when you know you're going to have some fun and the chances of those conditions meeting are great. Because quite frankly, our environmental variables control a lot of what that experience can be for that kid, right? And what that experience can be for the adult, quite frankly, when you do adult sailing. Right? Being able to set that up the best you can, I think is a big thing as well. Have fun, swimming is cool. Make sure that they get to swim off the dock, set up time for that, set up time for them to do other stuff, not just sailing the whole time from 9 to 5. Right? Set other activities up for that. And something that we're starting this summer is totally ripping off the U.S. Sailing STEM program and everything else. I've literally taken pictures of the books, don't tell you how to sail like that, and building a curriculum from that, and we're doing a science and sailing class. This class opened up for registration last night at midnight, our time. It is almost full, and it's 3 o'clock the next day. Right? Everybody was so intrigued with being able to combine this and doing something different for it. So I know there's a bunch of talks and some stuff about the STEM program and REACH program. I highly suggest it. It's something that I think will work really well, even though I'm totally ripping it off.
Okay, so just touching again on high school. It's very important, it's sailing cool boats, right? Kenny mentioned it, everybody keeps mentioning it. My kids want to go fast. They want to jump in, they see the 29ers sitting there, half rigged on land, and they're like, that looks awesome. I want to go fast. I want to do something that is more exciting than, sitting in the opti by yourself and trying to figure out how to get out of irons, right? And, we've all been there. Going fast is important, but like John said, we're limited by, what's around us, what kind of boats we have at home, and the weather. It's really important, like John mentioned, that when you take your high school kids and you want them to get into a boat that goes fast, that they have enough of a base knowledge, right? You can't take the random kids that we had at our free sail the week before and throw them into a 29er, unless all they want to do is go swimming, which maybe they do. Maybe that's okay, but you'll probably do a lot of boat work the next day. So instead, making sure you have something that's like that in-between step. Get them in a boat that is a little bit sturdier so that you're not doing a lot of boat work all the time, but that you're teaching them how to trapeze, how to fly the spinnaker, how to do all the basic stuff but it's faster to step up from just a mainsail or just a main and a jib. Something that's going to cause the kids to have to work together, which is a huge part of sailing. If you have a friend with you, if you're building a team, that's going to get you going for the next day. But making sure that you have something to work towards. So yes, we get them into the 420s, and I'm teaching them how to trapeze, and they're not going around the forestay, and they're learning all the basic stuff. They're learning how to go fast. They're learning how to work with their skipper or their crew. But then they're also working towards that cool, 5.7 or that cool 505, something that's there that the local guy sailing has it in the parking lot, and you've worked with that person hopefully in your neighborhood and saying, hey, my best kids, if they work really hard, can this be a reward for them? This kid's great, maybe not the best racer, he's not on the track to go win, the 420 North Americans, but he sees your boat every day, and that is cool looking, and he wants to keep sailing. And if you have that, relationship with those people, that's perfect. I'm located basically in the middle of the parking lot. There's one little converted mobile office trailer that I run my class out of. I have 100 kids that come through my program. And so I'm just surrounded by boats that are in dry storage. And they come through and they sail every Wednesday night. We have a whole catamaran group, and they're basically talking to my high school kids every day, saying, hey, next Wednesday, if Molly lets you out of practice, can you come sail with me? And those kinds of things that get the interest. Am I going to go buy a bunch of catamarans and rebuild my whole program with a different boat? No, definitely not. But working with people that are there around me, getting those cool boats for them, getting them rides. It's going to allow them to keep having fun. Where it says it's a club, have a handshake, a t-shirt, something. Basically the idea that this is my thing. I'm a 15-year-old kid. I don't really want to listen to mom telling me that I have to go do this or that. Or, I don't want to have to go home and only do my homework and stare at a computer screen. I want to be part of, my high school sailing team or whatever team they want to call it. Sometimes if I find myself, okay, I'm naming this class, the Saturday Rock Stars or whatever, some weird name. The kids don't like it, they're not going to sign up for the class. Who cares if it's the same thing that they're trying to, they're going to come up with the same idea. If they want to name it something else, change it. Go with whatever they think is going to be cool. As long as, you still have your laid out, the goals of what the class is, and you'd be leaving at the end of the season learning X, Y, and Z and able to get to the next step. If they want to make it that, hey, every time we come to practice, our pennies are going to have this weird, lightning bolt and a frog on it. Cool. Makes sense to them. They think it's cool. They all get to wear it. I don't know why. Even cooler, because I'm in charge and I don't get to know why it's cool, right? Trying to make it somehow fun for the 15-year-old and make sure that, the ego of the person running the program isn't too big. You got to make sure, hey, great, I might think I'm a great sailor, but at the end of the day, I'm not 14 again. I don't get to be in that kid's head, and I don't know exactly why they're going to be into it, but all their friends have figured out why it's cool. And if that's their thing, and they're going to wear the frog t-shirt, cool. Recruitment tool, obviously it's the kids. It's kind of a theme, right? The kids are what drives it. If they're allowed to, safely go and do their sailing and whatever you have down on your lesson plans for them, and they're having fun, they're going to go bring their friends. So when I started my program, I started right when I got back from the games, 2 days later. I didn't have the best results at our Olympic Games, and so I really needed something to do. I needed a big project, and this was a big project. So I took over the program. We had basically about 19, 20 high school kids sailing in the program. And they were excited that I was there, and I was like, oh my gosh, how am I gonna, and they were from 10 different schools, so there was no organization. And they're like, hey, we want to keep sailing, we want to do this, and I'm like, okay, well, go ask your friends. And as of this semester, I'm turning people away. We have 50 people max in our high school program, and we got 35 in our fourth. We just have so many kids that I have to close the doors. And I didn't do a single bit of advertising. All I did was tell the kids, go back to your neighborhood, go back to your school, bring them down. I did 2 free sail days in one semester, and I did 1 this last semester, and it just literally sold itself. And the biggest thing that I was surprised with, we're in Silicon Valley, the means are there for everyone in our neighborhood and around us to be able to sail. No one knew we existed, didn't even know it was an opportunity. and the kids go to schools where, you know, they're all playing all the other sports, they're doing everything. They went back to their schools, got everyone to come down. So, you know, I love marketing and I think it's great, but our kids are the best way to sell the message. The kids are the biggest thing. Make it easy to check out. Again, it's like, I have, you know, my structured classes. I have classes run 5 days a week. But let's say they want to sail on a day there's not a class. I'm never going to say no, don't go sailing. Make it easy. You know, you send an email, you make sure you sign in, you sign out, something so that you're never turning kids away. You know, it might be a free sail, like who was saying this morning in one of the big talks that they didn't know how to do, maybe it was Cappy in a smaller talk, but they didn't know what a free sail was. You know, you bring kids, they're so structured. You know, you go to your classes all day, you have study hour, you have, you know, X amount of time you get to be on your computer. Everything is so regimented. So when you throw them into a boat and you say, hey, leave the dock and I'll see you in 2 hours, it's amazing the faces that you get. You're like, what do you mean? What am I going to do for 2 hours? Where do I go? So allowing them to figure out what to do. You know, go sailing, come back. And I don't want to see you. Don't come back to the dock for another 2 hours. And it's pretty surprising, you know, and it's cool. The first time they'll give you the look of I have no idea what to do. The next time they're like, oh, this is awesome. I'm going to go find this cool place around the corner, there's a rock, whatever. You know, but the kids have to be given that chance to kind of go out and figure it out on your own. Common goal racing or cruising. Again, you know, I left sailing because I didn't want to race. And now all I do is race. So, you know, same kid, different ages, different things around me. Who knows why I went one way or the other. But whatever you're throwing, you know, whatever kid shows up to you, make sure you have something for that kid. You know, if they want to do the free sail only, you know, I have high school practices where I just want to do these 5 drills and I'm trying to organize these 14 boats and come on, and there's the one kid that just wants to laugh and goof off with his buddy in the boat. Then you figure out how to add that kid into the drill. That yes, they're going around the mark, but they're not doing the tacking on the whistle drill, but they're still out there sailing. Their goal is to go have fun and cruise around, great. The other kid's goal is to go qualify for nationals. Cool, same practice, I'm going to be able to keep both of them happy so that they're all out on the water and all still part of the same team.
You know, it's talked about, I don't know if you guys were in the industry talk that we had, the CEO of West Marine talks about, you know, them as a company recognizing their target audience and their actual audience and trying to figure out what the difference is between the two. And it's very much the same thing in sailing programs and keeping kids engaged and younger, is realizing what your programs are targeting and what your actual audience is, the people around you. What do these kids want? You know, whether it's college-age kids, high school, elementary, what do they actually want out of this? What are they actually into? What do they want to look at? And trying to come between them. I mean, as a racing coach and someone that's been involved in racing my whole life, I totally focus all the time on, okay, I want the kids to be able to do this. This is where the classes should be structured. This is the way it should go. But a lot of the times, that same class has no interest in it and wants to do something else. So recognizing what your actual audience is a big part of it. Talk about that with the college and post-college crowd. This is my Zagat guide for this group here. They have negative money, so the money is on the low. We all know that going into it. So that's what we have to really think about, is that economic entry point is a big factor. I know it gets said, and you're like, yeah, I know that. I read that 7 times already today and 2 times yesterday, but it's really true, and we have to think about how we can work with that. Looking for a fun atmosphere with an open bar, right? Plain and simple, college kids, it doesn't have to be a bar. I know there's been a lot of talk about drinking at a US Santa conference, which is weird. But you know, there's a lot of talking about this atmosphere, but it's true. They want to have a relaxed atmosphere. Just like the high school kid, the college kid and the post-college kid wants ownership, wants you to trust them, wants you to show them trust, wants you to know that you have faith in what they're doing, and vice versa. And they want to have that open part of the club. And I think that, you know, a lot of times yacht clubs try to approach this, and in different clubs in general, where they think they're being open by opening the doors and inviting them, but you're inviting them into your environment, right? You're inviting them into the environment that is the coat and tie, you know, hat off type atmosphere, and they want something different from that. And I think we have to do a better job as yacht clubs, and we're members of like 7 yacht clubs right now, and all those yacht clubs have to do a better job of listening to what their younger members actually want out of it. And it's not just a party, it's actually an environment. It's a social environment that they want to get. Time, looking to fit in a lot into a small amount of time. I mean, that is the definition of a college/post-college person, right? They want to do a lot. There's a lot out there for them for the first time, and they have very little time to succeed in all of it. So helping them being organized and having an organized system of how you're going to get on the water, access to get on the water, showing them those access points for it, but also recognizing how much time they have. You know, they want to know that they don't have to be there every week to have a chance at the club championship, right? They want to know that, okay, these are the few times, perfect, now I can do this, this, and this as well, right? So kind of managing that. No boat ownership goes along with the negative money situation. Want cool toys, right? They want to play in cool boats. I have 2 assistant coaches right now at Stanford, and they're both, you know, under the age of 30, so this is like the perfect target for them. They're both college All-Americans, done some Olympic stuff, everything else. They have no interest in doing keelboat fleet racing up the city front in St. Francis, right? They have no interest in doing, I mean, actually both of them did the Lightning Boat donation program, where they get to go in, grant program, they got to sail that, and they had a cool time and they learned a lot, but at the end of the day, they want to go kiteboard, right? At the end of the day, they want to go keelboat team racing. They want to go keelboat match racing. They want to do things that are quick, easy, fun, exciting, their age group is into, right? And they're having a lot of fun with it. That industry meeting as well, they talked about a German sailing federation that is doing this cool program, which is a lot like college sailing, so see how that worked out, that they're doing short course races. They're doing like 10-minute races, short course in keelboats. They have 6 keelboats, and they rotate through those keelboats, and they have a great time. And they started off, I think they said the number was like 15 clubs they're enjoying. Now they have 56 after 1 year, because they're doing fun, exciting, close races. They're doing it close to shore. You get heckled at. You're part of it, whether you're on shore or on the water. There's a great social scene from that. Another thing I think about going back to Annapolis is they have the Interclub Midwinters every year, which is a cold, brutal regatta in a bathtub. I mean, come on. Like, how could that be a cool event? One of the coolest events of the year. It's freezing cold, it's snowing, there's an A and B fleet, so you're not on the water the whole time. You're cheering on your buddy who affects your score, right? Just like college sailing in that way. There's a keg on shore, chili, big pot of chili, right? Everybody's hanging out, having fun, and it's a great way to spend a Saturday. And it's snowing. You know, it just happened a couple weeks ago, right? I mean, that's how cold and awful it is, but they have a great turnout every year, right? And having events that are fun and condensed and have a short time frame, these are things that are possible and are already attracting a lot of people from that. Open bar, social scene for young and fun, okay? Different opportunities. I think the other part of it that we're not talking about is the sailor that doesn't have a lot of experience with team racing, racing in general, anything else, how to get those sailors into the sport or continue them on. Maybe they took a Learn to Sail class at Stanford. And we teach a ton of master's, PhD students, undergrads, how to sail. They're also taking golf and stuff like that. There's a lot of different colleges that teach this. MIT is one of the biggest ones. They have a huge learn and rec sailing program. So how do you keep them going and keep having an opportunity? There's some great examples where MIT, you can sail on the Charles River in the middle of Boston anytime. You get a rec card, you go out, check out a boat, you go sailing, you're in the heart of Boston, it's cool, right? You're looking over at the Citgo sign, seeing the world champion Red Sox, go Red Sox, and it's great. You know, they're having a great time for that. We do the same thing at Stanford. I completely copy their model, right? We have a rec sailing card. You go out, you get checked out, you get to take our boats out a couple days a week, and you go sailing in our bay. We have a sailing center right near a marsh. You know, we have seals, there's birds flying over. It's a great experience. They have no interest in racing or anything else. There's no booze involved, right? They're just having a great time from that. Another example of this, we started when I was in Chicago, this Crew U program. It's Crew University, and this was mentioned earlier this morning in one of the talks, is that there's no crew training programs. Well, you know, years ago in Chicago, we actually started this program, and I think it's still going. But we brought all the beer can racers that wanted crews, and we said, okay, if you want crews, you got to do a little work. So we're going to teach you, we're going to teach competent crews. So when you start the beer can series this summer, you're going to have your pick of crews that are out there. Right? You get to go sailing. So we brought this whole Crew U. The whole thing was that they had no experience in sailing. We taught them terminology. We taught them basic handling, how to be on a boat, how to be comfortable around the water. It wasn't like, this is how you sail upwind. It wasn't like, this is how you jibe. You know, it's just basic so they can be comfortable and feel like they're part of the boat that they're sailing on. And it was a huge program. It actually got ranked the #1 singles hotspot in Chicago for this program, right? Because singles were coming down and meeting each other, you know, and having a great time. And the reward was the end of the class, is that they joined the Wednesday night beer can races, and they got to sail them. And so the Wednesday night beer can racers had crew, right? And the members, a lot of them became members of the yacht club, so the members had younger members coming in, right? There's a single scene, got some marriages out of it, you know, still getting some text messages about that, which is great. You know, there's a lot of things that can happen with that for sure. Common themes here. #1, and we heard this morning, and it's so true, is you have to listen to your audience. You've got to listen to what they want and what they need, right? So in that vein, what do you guys want? Do you guys have any questions? Anything that we need to be listening to you, a topic that we're not touching on?
Yeah, I appreciate that kids, I got kids out of college that don't have any money and they want cool toys and they don't want cool clothes. But, you know, our yacht club doesn't have the resources to Stanford University and MIT. So I'm fuzzy on where that money comes from. You know, how do you make that work? I appreciate the goal, but I don't know how to make that deal work.
And so does your club have, you know, members with boats and stuff like that that they're sailing on?
Yeah, but not, you know, we don't have a lot of cool hot boats.
You know, it doesn't have to be, you know, there's been a lot of talk about, you know, skiffs and multi-hulls and crazy boats and everything else. I mean, the color, there's lots of talk about color. The Crew U program that I was talking about that might fit for you guys is a program where we started off all the sailing on Tartan 10s. Talk about the most unsexy boat in the history of sailing, right? Tartan 10s is basically like the bigger bathtub. But everybody sailed and had fun. It was a good, easy cockpit to move around. And it wasn't about the sex appeal for that as much. It was about being together in that social scene.
But any ideas on how to, how to fund, how to get this done?
The next in this room is actually about that topic.
Hey.
There you go. You're in the right seat then.
I hate to use the terminology, but when you were at Chicago Yacht Club, what was your close ratio? The percentage of these young, youthful college kids that came in, how many ended up being members? What was the
In the first year, it was low. It was maybe, like not even 1%. In the second year, we expanded that program. We did a crew PhD program as well. We got really tricky with the name. And it actually jumped up to like 5% of the total program. And it got more and more. What we did, what the difference was, is that we had more social events afterwards for them to hang out, and we got the yacht club to open up the bar to let non-members in this class come in and hang out and have a meal and stuff like that. And they got to see the value, like we talked about earlier, the value in what you get for being a member.
And at what age? I mean, after you do all this and spend all this money and time and energy, what is the age, and are they staying on and committing to your club, or are they bopping around to other clubs? And if it's priced so low, there isn't necessarily a commitment there. And I think we're kind of wrestling with that at our club. Where do we find that balance of, we want them to afford it, we want them to join, but if it's, are they committed? And
it's true, and I think that's the hard part, is that there's definitely a risk into this, that you have to work hard to keep the cost low for a certain period until, the average person is getting on with their career and able to make that money to be fully committed. I don't know what the percentage is. I left Chicago and went somewhere else. But we're obviously still members of yacht clubs and everything else. But I think it's hard to tell right now what that is. But it's a tough question. But I think it's worth the risk, to get out there and give that a shot.
And it's also just holding, giving that group, okay, here's your low membership, and is this really giving back to the club? Definitely not. It's like a junior program to most yacht clubs. You're losing money, tons of money, and the yacht club has to keep helping out that junior program to become positive. but it's that long.
We charge for the junior programs.
What's that?
But
Sorry?
we charge for the junior programs. This, we're not charging.
Oh, we charge
I would
for
charge.
all these programs. It just wasn't a ton of money.
Yeah, it's low, like basically, maybe you're paying for a coach that's teaching it, or maybe you're paying for the parts that are gonna be replaced because they're bumping into each other. But yes, it's not, you're not making much money from them, but it's a long-term investment. So you're saying, okay, I'm hoping you stay on. If it's just, here's the class and I hope you stay, I'd probably leave and go check out another club too. There's gotta be that next step. So it's like the little kids are learning in the slow dumb boats or whatever, then they have to take the next step. I have to give them something to keep them going. So what's the next step? It's a boat with a spinnaker. Still, it's heavy and slow and whatever, but it's one more thing to learn. It's like the crew U to crew PhD to, okay, what's the next thing? Great, here are, the Wednesday night fleet is so active. They're the people, those are your marketing tools. So those people are pulling the low membership people for the next 5 years, keeping them interested, having the parties, having the, Christmas party, whatever it might be, that keeps them coming back for the next season. And then hopefully in another couple years, they've now made enough money and they're like, I'm hooked and I want to buy the whatever fleet that you have at your club.
Let me ask you, your presentation was fascinating, particularly your backgrounds and, your experiences. And I'm thinking about you as a kid bending ribs and, working on your wooden boat and so on and so forth. And all of a sudden you lost me when you shifted to the post-college person that you're trying to appeal to, where, I guess what I'm trying to get at is, where do you draw the line on these values of commitment, ownership, responsibility from people who are, you're looking to them to sometime, somewhere, somehow start paying back. And you've been doing that since you were 8 years old, so I'm a little confused.
Well, I think the hard part is the retention rate isn't high, right? It's going to be, you're going to continue to lose things, and quite honestly, if we had all the answers here for this, we probably wouldn't even have this conference right now. There's no guarantee in this, but I think that the big point that we're trying to get out, especially with this age group of college and a little post-college, is to be able to listen to them and adapt it to what they're looking for. Not just provide another membership scale financially, but to be able to provide an environment that's more welcoming to come in. Now, how many will stay because of this? I don't have a good answer for you. I really don't, and I don't know if anybody really does. And I think it's tough to determine that. But having youth in the yacht club or in your community club or whatever it is adds value to that and brings the club into a better place. Certainly, I think there's a lot of different things where yacht clubs offer membership and offer systems like this, and you get a lower fee, but you have to pay back and do some work for the club. Do work on boats, help out with organizing, decorating for parties and stuff like that, that are normally happening in your yacht club. There's other ways for them to pay back in the short term, and that actually might help them be more involved with the general membership overall, to be like, oh, cool, this is something that we want to be part of in that as well.
I have a lot of kids in my program that are scholarship kids. They're basically, we're taking care of them being in the class, and they pay back, like you're saying, by doing boat work and stuff. We don't have a club, so it's not, decorating for the parties, but they do boat work with me. And is it a ton of help? It's probably a little bit more work on my part, because I have to teach them as I'm doing all the fiberglass work and stuff like that. But those kids are probably, and they're the ones that came from like, I know nothing about sailing and I'm just showing up. Those are, they ask me, hey, when's the next work party? When do you need me to come down? I want to build the wrecks. I want to gel coat with you and stuff like that. So it's the idea of that, you're building the beetle cad in the basement.
And those are the kids at the younger level, if I understand it.
Correct. Yeah, I'm only dealing with up to 18-year-olds.
Right.
So once they go to college, they're hopefully teaching for me, but they're not in my program. But it's like, tailoring to what the kid is. So I have kids that, aren't necessarily trying to pay back, class fees. They just want to do it. They ask me, when's the next work party? Which is the coolest thing ever. When I first started, they knew nothing. They knew what electrical table was. That was it. And I was like, oh man, this is going to be a lot of work. But now, after 1.5 years, they're asking me, okay, when's the next time I can come down? And, I kind of, in the back of my head go, man, what did I start? Because it's a lot. I can do it twice as fast by myself. But they're into it. So cool, next Saturday I'm gonna be there for 8 hours and we're gonna work on fixing all those dings that we did over the semester.
And I guarantee you that the retention rate goes up later on in the college, post-college age, if they're exposed in their program, that same program early on as a kid, and learning, those kids that are in that program, learning to give back at an earlier age. I think a lot of times there are youth programs, and I've certainly been guilty of it, that the coaches or the staff do way too much and don't have the kids involved in giving back and recognizing that that's part of the sport is giving back. And if you start that culture at an earlier age, it might not be at your club, they might move to a different part of the country or whatever else, but they will hopefully pay that forward, right? Good movie, pay it forward, and be able to connect that to, you know, their next stop along the road. And I think that's a good part of like starting that culture early rather than trying to establish it later on.
I'm involved in a one design class where we've had our successes, and probably the core membership is in the folks north of 40 years old. And we see a gap for us, and I see some intriguing thoughts you presented, but I see our gap as being maybe how would we tailor some of these thoughts to attract to the, say, the post-college, the late 20s, early 30s folks that may have drifted away or may never be in it, to start to become interested in a sport that they can access to cover the things that work for somebody that age. I just wondered if you thought about it, your thoughts relative to some of these great ideas and how we might look to that group to bring them into the sport.
I mean, I think the biggest, the easiest, like that comes quickly, are your Wednesday night, whatever your nightly, you know, the fun races that you have. I know they're one design, but Thursdays you always go out and you race. Having it like the open house idea, you know, like advertising that, hey, we're gonna come. You kind of have to, it's just like when I have my kids go sail with the people that are around in my neighborhood, you have to handpick who those people are, because, you know, not all of us are happy-go-lucky, friendly mark rounders, and some people like to scream and that kind of stuff, and you don't want to scare away the 40-year-old, but it's the, you know, making sure you have your handful of 5 boats and saying, hey, we're going to have next Saturday, yes, it's our normal race that we always have, but everybody has to have, these 5 boats have to have at least 2 people that they've never seen before on the boat. So you're recruiting people either from your work, from your neighborhood to come down. Maybe you only see them on that day, but that's the Saturday you guys picked as a fleet. And, hey, we're always going to, you know, maybe it doesn't count towards your club standings at the end or whatever, fleet standings, but it gets people involved.
I think a big part of like one design classes is that the barrier of education. And I think a lot of times where you look at like the lightning class, the etchel class, and stuff like that, you can have, you know, let's just say a rock star college sailor goes in and you want them to join your fleet and be part of that. And they probably do really well off the starting line, but then they don't really know how to make the boat go. You know, they don't know that tuning, that fine aspect of it, and they drop out because they're not given that education. The thing that does the lightning class really well is that they work really hard on educating new people into the boat and making that access and entry into that fleet as easy as possible, and trying to get them up to speed on what's going on and making the boat go upwind, being able to be involved in the boat, what's happening on the boat itself. The 505 class is another one. They go out of their way to make sure that when new people come in, they're not crowding around like it's fresh blood, but they're crowding around and be like, how can we help you be part of this? What education can we give you? Can we give you a spare part? What do you need to be part of that class and be into that group as well?
Can I just sort of add on to this point? I know locally we have a really big snipe class, and it attracts, locally in San Diego that is, locally we have a big snipe class, and it attracts a lot of post-college sailors. And a couple of things that we try to do with every regatta, we host maybe 5 or 6 major regattas in our fleet every year, is that if you know someone that can sail your boat or sail a boat, we get them in that boat. If that boat's not being used by the owner, there's obviously a lot of trust involved, but we'll get that boat on the water with somebody who knows how to sail. And then again, kind of going off what John was saying, everyone's really cool about sharing tuning tips and how to sail the boat fast and getting everyone up to speed to sort of boost the fleet as a whole.
You know, another thing that came to mind too is that, I forgot what year it was, but it's a couple years ago, New York Yacht Club hosted the College Nationals. And everybody looked at the New York Yacht Club, I did myself, and everybody in that college sailing realm looked at the New York Yacht Club as like this big thing on the hill, right? And was like, there's no way we could become a member of that. And they did a really good job of coming down during the college nationals and say, we want you to become a member of our club and add to our club. We want you to be part of our membership, be part of our tradition and everything else. And this is how we'll do it. And they went out and did recruitment like that at these college regattas. And I thought it was interesting. And their youth membership like skyrocketed during that time frame, which I thought was really cool. So just another way for Yako specifically.
I have a question for you, jumping back to we were talking about the youth education. Can you talk a little bit more about your approach to balancing the fun aspect with the focus and discipline that it really does take to excel in this sport?
Sure, not a big topic, but so I basically lay out our whole semester, let's say, whatever the class structure is going to be. I lay it all out ahead of time. So I know that by a third of the way through, I want all my kids to be at this level. And then within that, checkpoint that I have, I know that Johnny should well be above everybody else. And if Claire makes it to this point, that's going to be a win. So I kind of go through what each kid, I take the time to figure out if this kid is, Cruiserville, or if this kid is, wanting to go to the Olympics, and seeing where they're going to fit, and making sure that each practice I run everyone's going to be achieving the same goal. It's just I have higher expectations, I guess, for that specific kid or that boat. It makes it difficult sometimes to give, here I have 25 kids in front of me, and to give one big debrief to the 25 kids when they're all at different levels. But you just have to get really good at being concise and hitting on the same 3 points. It's all basic 3 things that you're working on for the day. But on the water, those 3 things, I gave 10 more things for this one kid that I knew could take it. And the other boat, that those 3 things are still like, but I don't understand how to switch my hands behind my back. Then here are the 3 things, but let's focus on this. And I tell them about switching their hands. So you kind of have to, it's more taxing on the coaches. You got to make sure that you're tailoring it to each kid. But that's like what our sport is, right? You have people that are at all different levels, and we're all going around the same course at the same time. And for those kids that are really like very hard to get them to ever do a starting practice, or a rabbit start, or something that's like, this is just not fun, then I give them an option of what to do on the same race course. Basically, they're working on that hand switch, and they have to do at least 3 tacks around this little course that I've set up, or something that's like tailored to that level. And then if kids are definitely, let's say I'm hitting a wall with these 5 different boats of, it's just not enough fun for them, then you got to come up with something else. So then I'll say, okay, great. All of us need to sail our boats, sail up to the winter mark, and you all have to come back to me. No backing your sails, but you have to go backwards the whole way. And you'd be amazed that like Rockstar Craig can't do it at all, and Cruiserville Claire is like killing it, and she can do it all because she has great feel, but she didn't know it. And then all of a sudden it's like bing, something clicks in her head, and then she's like, ooh, I'm kind of good. And then, she gets excited, and who knows, a door opens for her. So it's sort of, you have to be really quick to be like, here's my end goal for the day's lesson, or the, 3 weeks or whatever. But if that lesson isn't working that day for some of the kids, you gotta alter it and say, okay, these are still the 3 points that I'm going for, but I'm gonna make it fun. And everyone's still gonna be working on a skill without them maybe knowing,
And I think the big part of any of this that we're trying to get in a whole is that, and it was mentioned earlier too, that you gotta show improvement. You gotta show attainable goals that every segment, every ability level can get. And if they have attainable goals and they can see improvement to be able to get to that goal, they're going to be more engaged, and they're going to want to stick with it as well. And one other idea too is the America's Cup was pretty cool this summer for sure, but one of the coolest things that happened was actually the AC Open, and they had this big ramp, which is actually now at Stanford, which is nice. They had this big ramp that they had like a different event go on each week, like each day it was a different event, whether it was an open Vic regatta, which you saw pictures of earlier, or they had catamaran racing, or they had stand-up paddleboard racing and stuff like that. They had all these things in front of a park full of people, and I think that's huge. We do in the Club 420 class, we do a CJ Buckley team race in this park, and random people that know nothing about sailing come down and see like 200 boats come into the shoreline and see team racing right off the shore, and they're like, what's that about? Right? That's pretty cool. What are you guys doing here? You get those questions all the time. So showing off the sport, you know, going to parks, going to other venues that it's easy access and easy to see, I think is a big deal. Being able to do that and using that BC open model is a lot of fun too. They also give the kids these cool pens. Please, if you would, do the check-in and the review. The yellow sheets are back in that corner, I believe, or you can do it on your app. And if you guys have any more questions, please come up and ask for sure.